Incidentally, you guys can all thank me later. I think I told you. You know, it's like, I guarantee that there's more power failures in Meridian Township. I put in a home generator. Yeah. Once you plow that kind of money into something, you know it's not going to be very useful.
Yeah. Fire it up. Make sure.
Well, no, it turns it's got a computer brain. It turns itself on one side.
Oh.
I'm the one that made the sacrifice. So, actually, they set that up because I got an electric. So they would charge my car too. Unless I need more electricity than I can sell. And I'm going to be very popular in the neighborhood if there is a power failure because everybody's going to be coming over like, they have a transformer in the backyard. And one time it did sound like a hand grenade. Pretty good. There we go. Okay. It is now 6:30. Today is April 10, 2023. I'm calling to order the meeting of the Meridian Township Planning Commission. First, we'll start with a roll call. Commissioner Tresize.
Present.
Commissioner Shrewsbury.
Here.
Commissioner McConnell.
Here.
Commissioner McCurtis.
Here.
Commissioner Scales.
Here.
Commissioner Snyder.
Here.
Commissioner Brooks.
Here.
And Mr. Richards notified us he would not be attending tonight. And Mark Bloomer, the chair, am also present. So we have a quorum. First, let me go with open public remarks. I noticed that we have numerous folks visiting with us this evening. Do any of you want to make a general statement to the board? No. So we'll move on then to approval of the agenda. Moved by Commissioner Tresize. Seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
There are no dissents, so the agenda is approved. Now, item number 5 on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the March 27 meeting. Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Commissioner Scales moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Shrewsbury. All in favor of approving the minutes from March 27?
Have one, couple of quick. One silly one and one not. So item 7A, there was some discussion about the rezoning of the church property. And my comments there were that I thought a project was a great thing, and that was in quotes, sort of scare quotes, which kind of surprised me because I don't typically, I think that's exactly what I said, but it's not the sort of normal paraphrasing that we see in the minutes. So beneficial or something like that is, I think, probably better.
I will say we do have a new Zach 3, working on the minutes now. So
They're excellent. That's why I like nitpick.
there will be a little bit of growing pains as he gets used to our process. So we won't let him know if the scare quotes are unnecessary.
All right.
And on item 10, just before the sub-paragraph A, it's on page 4 of the minutes. Not page 4 of the packet, but I was commenting on the multi-residential status of the building compared to the single residence housing in the neighborhood. And I think my comment was about the multi-residential nature of the envisioned development compared to the single residence zoning in the surrounding neighborhood. That's it.
Are there any other amendments or improvements? Yes.
There was one in section 10. It looked like it was a master plan update, and this may have been how it worked. But then there ended a question about Trader Joe's at the very bottom. of that whole section that really wasn't part of the master plan update. It was probably more appropriately in project updates or reports and announcements. So it may have chronologically come there, but I don't think it belongs there in the minutes.
I don't see it.
Actually, the very bottom on page 6 of the minutes, which is, I don't know what page it is of the whole packet, right above section 11 of the minutes.
Oh, Trader Joe's, okay.
Yeah. And, because I think everything else above that was related to master plan, and that was a question that got tagged into that, so.
Mention something, actually. I wouldn't come to the podium, but I don't have a microphone over there. Going back to 7A in the first paragraph, I just noticed that should not be rezoning 23007, that should be SUP 23007. Just want to make sure you guys do that before we change it.
Very good, thank you. All right, we have 3 friendly amendments.
Yes.
Any others? Approve on those? All right. So all in favor of approving with the amendments as suggested, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? No. All right, so the minutes are approved. Now we come into item number 6, communication. Yes.
Actually, going back to the minutes, if you go to the next item, it's listed as an SUP, the Werfel, and it should have been a rezoning, so the minutes, we need to fix that in the minutes too, I'm sorry.
I'll fix that.
Okay.
Thank you.
got it. Thank you. Now you can go.
Mr. Sharkey?
Not a communication, I just jumped the gun, sorry.
Oh, okay. So are there any communications that we have to?
We do not.
Yeah, all right, so we are now on to item number 7, SUP 23004, the veterinary clinic expansion.
Correct. This is, as you said, SUP 23004 to construct a 650 square foot addition to the existing business known as Schultz Veterinary Clinic at 2770 Bennett Road. It's an approximately 2.8 acre parcel. It is zoned rural residential. This is a vet clinic and therefore it's a special use permit. This is a major expansion that's necessitating a major amendment to the SUP that was previously approved in 2006. Rather than going through my report, I'm just going to say, just bring it up here on Google Maps. Staff only had 2 concerns. One is pretty easy to address, and the other one is going to have a bit of explanation. So the first thing you notice is that there is a big wetland on the property. I just want to assure you that the entire expansion is happening on the north side of the property. No wetland permit is required, therefore, for the expansion of this building. The wetland is not going to be disturbed by the construction of the addition. Now, the other thing that staff had an issue with, and I'll explain how this got fixed. The 2006 SUP approval for the previous expansion of this building had with it a condition of approval that they would expand the township pathway across their property. That wasn't done, and so now that we're here, that is still a valid condition that is going to need to be taken care of, especially since the pathway has been constructed to their property line from the east, and we anticipate sometime this year it coming in from the west from the Silverleaf, phase 1 of the Silverleaf development. Now here's how that got addressed. Township Public Works worked with the applicant. They together came up with a number for the applicant's contribution to the pathway in lieu of construction. This is a standard procedure that apparently DPW does often. So rather than them having to hire an engineer and build a pathway themselves, the township is just going to do it. Now the township DPW has moved their money around in their budget and has fit this into their project for this year. So they've written the check that they've been required to write by DPW. DPW has put this on their work schedule for this year. You will see a wetland permit from township staff, either DPW or engineering later this year, because that will affect the wetland. But that, the condition of this trail having to be put in place for the approval of this, staff is satisfied that that condition has been met. Staff has no other issues with this and would recommend approval and can answer questions at this time. Yes.
You deem this a regulated wetland, and I'm assuming that that's a state-regulated wetland, is that correct?
That is a township-regulated wetland. Therefore, it is a state-regulated wetland, yes. We have a wetland permitting process with the township that
Right, but
township
that's
staff
for less than
will have
5
to go through.
acres.
It goes down to 2 acres.
Right,
Yeah, yeah,
but a state-regulated wetland is 5 acres.
that is correct.
Is this a 5-acre wetland?
I don't have the exact size of the wetland. I know it is a regulated wetland, yes. I can get that for you if you need that, but for your at the next meeting.
Because if it's a state-regulated wetland, the wetland permit's going to have to come from the state.
But the township also, the state can give a wetland permit, but the township also has a wetland permitting process at the local level that they have to go through, the township has to go through as well. Township engineering is pretty well versed with this and they'll follow the proper procedures.
But what my issue is, I want to know if it's a state-regulated wetland or a local regulated wetland, because that is a difference.
It is by default a state-regulated wetland because it is a local regulated wetland. Our wetland regulation is more stringent than the state's.
Yes. But you can't tell me the size of this wetland.
I can't tell you well, here, I can show it to you. Give me a second.
Can you tell me what makes this a wetland?
The wetland vegetation and the moisture content, I haven't gone out and done a wetland, I can't.
We'll follow up.
I'll show
We'll follow
you.
up on the size of the wetland. It meets the definition of wetland per the ordinance.
Because my question goes to the point of why this wasn't done previously. Why
It's an item that wasn't followed up on by the previous director, and we're following up on it now.
Then it begs the question also, if someone previously applied for a state permit and was denied.
That is no, there's no evidence that the permit was ever applied for.
Okay, thank you.
This is an approximation, not a proper delineation, but this is the area of the wetland.
It shows under 3 acres.
Shows, yeah, under 3 acres, but that's still regulated by the township.
Okay. I enforced the wetland law for 30 years, and that's why I'm asking the questions.
Fair enough.
As a person who enforces the law, I had a question too, along the same lines. Why wasn't this charged as a code violation several years ago and enforced that way?
There's no record in the files of why they did not follow up on it. Ultimately, we're at a position now where we can address it, and we will be addressing it.
So it sat around as an unenforced code issued for more than 10 years.
It appears as such.
Okay.
When will construction and all that begin, for this particular?
I don't, the addition or the trail?
The trail.
I don't have a date yet. According to Mr. Opsimer, our head of DPW, they have scheduled it for this year. So, but I can't give you an exact date at this time.
And I know if the permit, I know the wetland police will make sure everything is right, but I'm just wondering what is in terms of the disturbance of the wetland, because I know it's part of the ecosystem and all that, is there like a potential for, bad disturbance for the wetland there and all that during construction?
Yeah, first of all, so our wetland ordinance has has buffer language. So if you're in the buffer, you need there's permitting about that. But this is going to be in the wetland itself, and we have a mitigation mechanism in our wetland ordinance. So if there's disturbance in the wetland, the township will mitigate that, I believe, at a 1.5 time factor.
Okay. And one last question about
Sure.
the walkway. What about the safety of it, being that it's going to, I guess, cross over into a wetland? Safety or access, because they have a tendency to flood and all that stuff. And, is there going to be anything special done to make sure that the accessibility is, always available?
I may use this as a segue to bring the applicant up. I wasn't involved in the conversations on the specification of this, of the trail, but I do believe that's been something that's been discussed. And I know that they are aware that there is quite a drop off and there is a wetland there. So, was that anything? Okay. So I can get details on that before the next meeting, before you actually approve this, if you wish.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, the only reason I ask is just because, you see flooding on sidewalks and walkways all the time in areas where there are wetlands. So I'm just wondering if something would be able to mitigate that with this.
I can answer part of that.
Let me see, does anybody have any more questions for staff? Otherwise, I will turn it over to the, okay.
I just have one more.
Sure.
Just to summarize, so I can wrap my head around this. We issue an SUP, we put a condition on the SUP in 2006. You don't comply with the condition that we established, and then we come back and you have another SUP before us, and that non-compliance, we fix it for you?
We are not fixing it for them. They have contributed they have worked with township engineering and DPW to come up with their cost in lieu of construction. We're going to construct it, but they have, I put information in the packet. They have paid over, well, it's public. I paid over $67,000 to the township for this. I'm going off the top of my head, maybe, but it's in the packet, yes. So
I missed that.
I will say, I can't speak for the people that were here in 2006, and I can also say that we have recognized the error and are fixing it now.
Okay.
Applicants are here if they want to hear anything from them. Do you have any questions? Okay.
I really don't have much to add, except for when I spoke with, who's the engineer that did the sidewalks?
Ma'am, excuse me, could you tell us your name and your address?
Ingrid Schultz, 1280 Sebring Road, Okemos.
Thank you.
Dan?
Yeah, the
Giannis.
engineer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Dan is our-
When we paid the monies, they said that they would take over this, so I guess they would be the persons to ask as far as their engineering. My concern was, to make sure they put a bridge, not a bridge, but there's a railing so that, because kids will be walking, well, anyone will be walking down there, by the wetland, but other than that, they said that they would take care of all the engineering and those factors, so I guess I would address them. Any of your concerns? Because they didn't tell me how they were going to construct it, so.
Commissioner McConnell?
Well, I have a comment in response to not necessarily a question for the applicant, but my comment was that the township is currently building pathways through wetlands and does use pretty industry standard techniques for pilings that don't require moving soil, which is normally your main wetland impact, is if you have to move soil around. But if all you're doing is driving pilings, then the impact is much lower and oftentimes doesn't require a permit. But if you look at the stuff the township is building right now, out behind the parking lot over to the lake and some of the stuff along Okemos Road, they know how to build really great pathways across wetlands. So This will come to the Environmental Commission, and I'm sure it will be approved because it'll be a minimal impact for a great resource. That's it.
Anything further on this issue?
Nothing, we would welcome any straw vote that the board might take at this time.
Is there public comment?
We've heard from the proponent. Is there any other public comment about this issue? No? All right, thank you. Then I guess we'll move on to item number 8 on the agenda.
Do a straw vote on this.
Just for straw.
Discuss it, yeah.
Are we far enough into it? Yeah, all right.
You want to do the straw vote first.
Straw vote?
Before the next, I think he's going up to the next.
Okay. It didn't even seem like we were far enough along for a straw vote.
Well, it's a public hearing, we normally do that more.
Okay.
We don't have to do it.
Well, let's, the issue then is approval of the expansion, correct?
Yes.
And it's understood that the pathway will be completed by the township with the financing of the applicant.
That is correct.
Okay. With that understanding, let's take a straw vote to see how this will go. All right, Commissioner Tresize,
Yes.
Commissioner Shrewsbury,
Yes.
Commissioner McConnell,
Yes.
Commissioner McCurtis,
Support.
Commissioner Scales,
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder,
Yes.
Commissioner Brooks,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes also. Okay,
Okay.
so you can work with that.
We will move forward. Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to item number 8 then, which is SUP 23007, 1502 River Terrace Drive.
You held the public hearing for this special use permit at your last meeting on March 27th. No major concerns were raised, and you agreed to consider a resolution to approve the special use permit to construct religious offices in a religious district, in a residential district at 1502 River Terrace Drive at your next meeting. And with that, staff has no further comment from the public at all, and you have a resolution of approval in your packet.
Just gotta find it. I think
There may have been a word missing in the resolution.
Okay.
I think it should have said construct.
Yeah, look at page 37 and following.
And then like the first whereas, the first.
Is a request, to construct, okay, yep, thank you.
Or to operate it, because I know they're not actually constructing anything, but.
It sounded like a lot like.
You know what, perhaps better than construct, because they, like Commissioner Shrewsbury said, they're not actually constructing anything, they're simply fixing up an existing building. How about say
Operate.
establish or operate a religious office?
Okay. Establish. I like that better, you're right. Okay.
Did everybody follow the suggested amendment?
Yes.
Are there any others?
Well, I thought that was a motion to adopt.
I will move to adopt it as that slight amendment, with the slight amendment.
I'll support.
All right. We have to do a roll call on this
Yeah.
one. All right. So the chair votes support. Commissioner Richards.
Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Commissioner Snyder.
Support.
Commissioner Brooks.
Support.
Commissioner Scales.
Support.
Commissioner McCurtis.
Support.
Commissioner McConnell.
Support.
And Commissioner Shrewsbury.
Support.
Commissioner Tresize.
Support.
And the chair's support. All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, so next then. Gotta switch back here. We are now on the lighting ordinance, item 9.
So we have had our intern Joey Emery with us for some time now, and Joey is ending the end of his term. But one of the things that we've had him working on for some time now is a modernization to our lighting ordinance. And as I've said multiple times, the majority of our ordinances were written in 1974 and need modernized. The lighting ordinance is actually one of the newer ones. It was 07, but functionally, at the time it was written, it was already obsolete. It was already talking about outdated technology. And so we cut Joey loose earlier this year on beginning the process of rewriting that ordinance. And what you have in your packet this evening is a beginning draft. And frankly, we don't want to talk about the draft this evening. I wanted to get it to you so you can start to see where we're headed with this. I still have to rinse it through the attorneys. I have to get a waiver provision in there because technically it's outside the zoning ordinance, so the ZBA can't weigh in on this. So it has to have its own waiver provision. There's a number of things that still need to happen, but we wanted Joey to be here this evening to present his work and give you a brief overview of the principles behind this, because it is a fundamental shift from how we are doing business right now in terms of lighting towards going to the dark sky principles that Joey's going to talk about.
So you wanted to throw some light on the subject?
Throw some light on the subject. Excellent, Dad. So I'm going to turn it over to Joey.
Mastery.
All of that.
So, yes, I just want to thank Tim, though, for giving me the opportunity again to work on this ordinance and present here tonight. So looking at the current ordinance, like Tim has stated, it doesn't align with the modern dark sky principles. And it's got a lot of disorganization issues, a lot of things listed under general requirements that could be categorized to make it read better and flow better, and just overall be more understandable. So this proposed ordinance is going to be consistent with those modern practices, and it's going to reduce a lot of these inconveniences that the current one is causing with the disorganization, and it's also going to create some educational opportunities with the newly implemented definitions, such as dark sky principles and color rendering index, correlated color temperature. So here's a graphic basically of what the ordinance is aiming to do. So on the left, you see unshielded lighting that doesn't have any dark sky controls to it. So what this ordinance aims to do is to implement these roughly 4 or 5 principles that will contribute to reducing or eliminating light pollution. So we have shielding, color temperature, intensity, which is how bright the light is itself, and timing, which has to do with lighting being turned off when it's not necessary for use. So here's kind of a background of why this is, I guess, important. So on the left, you can see a light pollution map of Meridian Township. And on the right is the Bortle scale. This is the accepted scale for measuring light pollution. It ranges from 1 to 9. Meridian Township is at a 6 and a 5 for most of it, and the commercial corridors are especially on that brighter side. The Lansing area itself can get up to a 9 at the center of downtown Lansing, so I would consider as a whole it's a hot spot for light pollution. So this is kind of the, I guess, leg to stand on when looking at our current ordinance and evaluating if it's doing a good job with modern principles or not, which I think you can see. So here are these modern principles I'm talking about, provided by the International Dark Sky Association. They'll be useful, targeted, low-level, controlled, and color. These are all things that the standards I'll be proposing will be aiming to address, so they're going to be useful, and that has to do with, timing and where lighting is allowed on the site, and low-level lighting is going to be less bright than it was before. There's going to be color controls of how warm the color of the light has to be. So this is basically the guiding principles of this ordinance here. So some of these key changes I had mentioned were the best practices and available technology. It's going to be more convenient for the public and create these educational opportunities. Specifically within those, we're going to be looking at adding controls of the colors and the trespass and glare standards, reworking the light output standards, which is things like the total site lumen amount and lumens per fixture. And we'll be hoping to add a curfew for unnecessary lighting, which I'll explain some what that means a little on. Some reasons why it'll be more convenient for the public. The big one is it's going to present the photometric plan requirements in a much more streamlined manner. Our previous one right now kind of has them scattered all around in the requirements, but this ordinance is going to summarize them at the bottom and make it easy to go back up and look at which ones you need to check the boxes for. And then lastly, the educational opportunities. I think that adding in some definitions that aren't necessarily used for the standards themselves is a good move to help the public just better understand light pollution and dark sky principles as a whole. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of what these requirements would look like. So right now, we don't have any control over the color temperature. And I think the best analogy I can give is we're told that, blue light, like from your phone before you go to bed, is typically bad for your health, bad for your sleep cycle. So this is roughly the same analogy here. So what the ordinance is proposing a 3,000 Kelvin correlated color temperature. That's the measure. And I put proposed preference on there because these, and this goes for all these standards as well, they're maximums, not design goals. The design goal would be the minimum amount for all of these. So that's just basically what 3,000 Kelvin would look like right there. Another control I'm looking at is color rendering index. This is basically how true to tone a source of light shows color of an object. So you can see on the left, it's dull, the colors are kind of blended together. On the right, they're more vibrant. So this is to ensure that we're basically getting the most modern, up-to-date technology that is capable of high color rendering index. So ours is going to be at 80, that's what I'm proposing. So with a combination of the warm tone light and the high color rendering index, we should be getting dark sky lighting that is also the most modern technology. So here's explaining a little what shielding and glare has to do with. So shielding is basically the amount of whatever you want to call them. They block the lighting, you could say, at an angle, depending on how horizontal or vertical it is. And so shielding and glare are interrelated because when we have these lower trespass standards, we'll also be eliminating the amount of light that's going and being seen from off-site. And so that image on the right there, I think, explains pretty well why limiting glare is important. That was taken from someone's bedroom window, I believe. So our current ordinance, this has to do with light trespass standards, which is how much light is at the property line of adjacent. So right now we allow 1 foot candle adjacent to commercial and half foot candle on residential. A foot candle is basically the measure of amount of lumens shining on 1 square foot. So it's a measure of how bright a surface is, as relative to lumens, which are just how much is coming out of the light itself. So our proposed ordinance is going to cut these numbers quite a bit, and these that I'm getting from are from the model lighting ordinance provided by International Dark Skies and the Illuminating Engineers Society, and then other more modern best practice planning documents. So that's just a preface for those numbers. Another thing we'll be looking at is the lumen foot candle levels. I just mentioned that. Currently, our ordinance allows 200,000 lumens an acre for the maximum density districts, which is way out of proportion of what the recommended standard is. So that translates to about 4.6 lumens a square foot on average. So our proposed ordinance will have a maximum of 2.5 lumens a square foot, and then in lower densities, it will be 1.25 lumens a square foot. Currently, we allow fixtures to be up to 9,000 lumens by an individual one, and I think the numbers say we should reduce that to around 3,000 per fixture. And then there's also regulations about maximum numbers on site, not averages, and we would like to reduce those as well. And a big thing that is not mentioned in our current ordinance is uniformity ratio of the parking lot. This has been shown, it's a measure of the minimum to maximum lighting level, basically how smooth the lighting looks across the parking lot. And this has been shown to be more correlated with appeared safety than lighting level itself. So I believe it'd be really important to include that in this newer ordinance. And so here's this lighting curfew I talked about. Its goal is to reduce or extinguish the unnecessary lighting in an effort to prevent light pollution. And light pollution, I've been talking about it this whole time, but I feel like most people, when they think of it, think of sky glow. And it applies really to any type of lighting that is not being used for an active purpose, right? So the purpose of the light curfew would be to allow for lighting that is for higher security, higher safety reasons, and higher vehicle traffic and pedestrian traffic. But for other cases, we would want to either dim or turn those off completely for purposes of, energy efficiency and that type of nature. So this is a new thing we'll be adding. There isn't anything like it currently in the ordinance. So after hours lighting that I talked about would be permitted up to 2-foot candles, which is much lower than the before hours lighting. And when I say after hours, there's a new definition called business hours, and this will be to allow for businesses who are open later into the night to have their lights bright until they are 30 minutes after close, and then for most uses, they will be dimmed to a point or shut off completely after that business hours is over. And I think a cool thing I like about a lot of these new dark sky principles is the use of motion activation and automated timer systems. That's something that we don't require right now, but it's a very simple measure that can really help a lot in the energy side. So here's just some image examples of this dark sky friendly lighting. So you got the stairs on the left. It's still aesthetically pleasing, and I think basically the goal of this is to show you that it can still maintain that design character while following these dark sky principles. So these are kind of different options. We have the wall-mounted one, the street lights, under canopy lights. There's a lot of different options that developers will be able to choose from to still follow these principles. And I wanted to talk about the definitions that I've mentioned a couple times. The definitions of dark sky principles and light pollution are going to be the heavy hitters in this. In the purpose, it's going to say this ordinance aims to follow dark sky principles to reduce or eliminate light pollution. And in the definitions, it will define the 5 dark sky principles, and it will define light pollution as more than just, sky glow, as more than just what it is right now. It will talk about clutter, glare, light trespass, effects on the human and nocturnal environment. So it'll be much more expanded, and everything in the definition section is going to be well utilized within the ordinance. So, and then I think it might also be useful to add some type of imagery, like you see right there, of what is acceptable and what is unacceptable. And I'm not showing the unacceptable ones, but these are just kind of similar to this last slide here, just some type of thing in the ordinance we can use. And then here are some resource links of different things for what I use to research for this ordinance and what might help you understand more of what it's all about. There's the light pollution map in there. There's the dark sky terms glossary and the model lighting ordinance that has most of these numbers. So I think that is where you'll find most of all of this information. So, thank you. Yes?
First of all, you did an excellent job. There's a lot of work represented here. Congratulations. One thing that occurs to me, I don't remember where it was, but I read it in the documentation. It's not usually a good idea to specifically refer to an outside source when you're creating a law or an ordinance. In other words, use the materials that you want to create the ordinance, but don't specifically refer it to the Dark Sky Association.
Sure.
Because they could go out of business, they could change their mind and change something drastic, and then it has to get reflected back into our statute or our law. So write it up in such a way that it uses the the levels and the terminology that you consider to be important, but don't make it specifically referable to an outside source, because that source could change or disappear.
Okay. Yep.
Aside from that, I think you did a wonderful job here.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with the great job. And I know, not taking like questions per se, but just something to think about that that just came to mind during the presentation. Energy efficiency. Like, is this a simple like changing bulbs, or do we use LEDs, or do those come into different color temperatures? LED lights,
Yeah, I mean, the LEDs typically you can.
So I'm not sure how that technology is.
You can dial them in a little more effectively usually when you're talking about this. I mean, functionally, that's where the industry is going anyway,
Right.
because they're so much more efficient, and because you can dial them in so much more effectively to what you want to show that, we don't even have to say it. That's what's likely to get installed in most cases as we go forward. That's what we're seeing. It's just changed since I've started being a planner, and you were fighting to get metal halides over the yellow sodiums back in the day.
And that's why I was wondering that too, because of the technology of LEDs coming into play. That's something we want to consider. And there was another thing, I can't remember what it was, but that was the biggest one. So.
But please, as the planning commission has feedback, please pass it along to me, and we're going to try and wrap up the ordinance here and get it back for public hearing in the near future.
Oh, I thought about the other one. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The other one said 12 midnight until 6 o'clock. A lot of times, in terms of safety, consider going beyond midnight, just because that's, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning. Just because of the safety, issue of it. When people are walking, they feel safe to have light. So if it's cut off at midnight, sometimes folks are out a little bit beyond midnight. So another thing to consider. That was the other thing. Thanks.
Yeah, you indicated that this is not part of the zoning ordinance.
No, it is actually, I looked this up today and I've already forgotten. It's section 22? Yeah. It's completely outside, it's 30. It's in a very odd spot. It's in miscellaneous regulations, chapter 38 of the overall code of ordinances. But we recognize that because it's directly a planning related thing, the board is going to refer this right back to the planning commission for input. So we thought we would just start here.
I guess my question is whether it should be part of either the building code or the planning commission's bailiwick is zoning.
So I think my guess is the reason it's not in the zoning ordinance is that it forces you to follow the regulations as opposed to trying to pursue a variance on a very technical item that might not be something that's probably up the ZBA's alley.
Okay.
I suspect. I also kind of wonder if they just didn't put it there because it's miscellaneous regulations. We can put whatever we want here.
Well, it wasn't part of zoning when they.
Exactly. It wasn't originally part of zoning, so that might be where it came from.
You may want to look and see if there's a better place to put it. Maybe in the building code that gets implemented with the site plan reviews or something like that, and it should be part of whatever applications we get through the planning commission to make sure it's conforming to it somehow.
Absolutely.
Are you looking for the feedback now, or do you want to?
We would welcome any feedback. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I used to work at Consumers Energy, and they're like one of the main streetlight owners, and so I was thinking about this ordinance specifically in that respect and how they've been installing new lights, and I don't know that they actually adhere to this practice. At least in Ottawa Hills, I don't know that it does. The second thing I was thinking about for this ordinance was low-income neighborhoods. Many times, those neighborhoods get targeted for higher amounts of lighting, which, because they're typically they get targeted for more lighting, basically, which isn't always a just method of deploying lighting. The second thing I was thinking about was HOAs and how those stakeholders set their own criteria for sorts of things like this, which led me to think about curfews on lighting and Christmas lights. So I just was like, is this going to cause like a huge uproar basically from people like just like screaming?
We have had that conversation, actually.
Yeah, I'm sure you have.
We think we've worked that one out.
Okay, good. Okay. This is just what was going through my
No,
head.
it's a very good catch, actually.
I was thinking about whether or not there's different applications of this related to the urban service boundary. So if there is a rural, basically the rural urban divide that goes through the township and how that would impact lighting regulation specifically. And that's everything I had. But that last one made me, just because of the unique nature of that boundary.
So my kind of question / comment, I guess, is more of a question, I guess. How does it connect with the sign ordinance at all? How does like lit signs play into all this too?
It does not. The sign ordinance actually has a provision that all illumination for signage is approved solely by the Director of Community Planning and Development. And it has to be downlit or internally lit, basically. So either inside the sign where I can't see the fixture or pointing down towards the ground.
Are they subject to already any kind of curfew?
No,
Are there sign lights, and would they be?
they would not. It's a separate kind of.
Separate, okay.
It might only apply to new development. Yeah.
I just want to comment also, even though I said all these comments and ideas, I think this is cool. And I think it's a good direction for thinking about how do we actually plan out guide rails around township planning. And I thought it was an effective use of your time based on your presentation.
It was impressive.
Good.
Quick question, do you know if any other communities in this area or in Michigan have adopted the model code or are leading in this direction? Is this something that is gaining popularity in the state?
Yeah, absolutely it is. If you take a look at the city of Ann Arbor's ordinance, they have a lot of the similar controls to ours. I actually reached out to a couple people who were involved in writing that ordinance, and they said they would have done it a little differently, so took some lessons that they had as well. But Ann Arbor has one. I can't think of off the top of my head right now any other ones in the state, but I know the city of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania also had a very similar ordinance to this. But to answer your question, yes, I think it is a upward trending type of ordinance.
Thank you.
Do you know about the Michigan State University campus? Are they following this?
I don't believe they have any type of specific regulations to it. They might be by design, but I don't think they have a plan per se, so.
I'm not being facetious here with this question, but I have to ask, how does this proposed ordinance apply to Christmas lights?
So the Christmas lights would be allowed, temporary lighting would be allowed in non-commercial areas, so residential, and it would be allowed for, I think, 90 consecutive days, not consecutive days of the year. So around the holiday season, Christmas lighting would still be allowed. The lighting curfew, I'm proposing would still apply to the Christmas lighting. It would follow that 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Time window. So that's how it would be proposed.
I learned about 10 years ago that we regulate Christmas lights here. We just don't tell anybody. So that was the basis of my question. I knew this had some type of impact on Christmas lights. But thank you for such a wonderful job that you did. Very appreciative of that.
Thank you.
Not to argue with Vice Chair, but I just wanted to state that I think it is appropriate to have this in the miscellaneous ordinances section. If you put it in the building code, for instance, it might only apply to new building. or it could be restricted in its application depending on where you stuff it. If you leave it in miscellaneous, then it exists under its own terms. And I think it might be more applicable and enforceable. So my preference would be to leave it in miscellaneous. But again, nice job.
It feels like we should have clapping when we do these things.
Come on,
Maybe that would break the decorum.
just an intern. Joey's done a great job. I'm glad that we were able to get this together for you guys this evening.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Chair, I would like to briefly go over the last two items under the master plan update. First and foremost, and we are not looking to discuss this evening, but we wanted to give you a solid draft of the goals and objectives as we see them at this point. So we've functionally got the 5 overarching goals that we discussed earlier. And part of the reason we're bringing this back again is because we do have 2 new members. So we want to get this back top of mind so we can talk about it at the next meeting. So 5 overarching goals, 3 of which came from the previous plan, 1 of which is sort of a combination from the previous plan, and then the PICAs are sort of being pulled out and given their own. Now that we've developed that idea in the last plan, we're going to build on it in this plan. Under each of those goals, 7 to 10 big statements, and then we need to continue to populate sort of our implementation matrix, sort of the specific how-tos that are going to happen over the course of the next 5, 10, 20 years. So we just wanted to get this in front of you so you can think about it, chew on it, because it's the big topics of the plan, and we'll discuss it at the next meeting. But if there are questions specific right now, I'm happy to answer them.
5 years since we adopted.
Okay. The bigger topic that I wanted to discuss this evening is to try and put a note of ending on any potential modifications to the urban service boundary. And so, again, we discussed this briefly prior to our newest members joining us, and so we wanted to come back at this time to sort of finalize where we're at. Previously, we looked at the urban service boundary in thirds: north, central, and southern. I think everyone can agree generally the southern area, sort of Grand River South, there's really no change that needs to happen in that area based on the current development patterns and any proposed development patterns. So we're not making any recommendation for a change there. In the northern part, we're making one minor recommendation to fix this little area on Green Road. This is 6121 Green Road and 6117 Green Road are split in half. So it's really just a technicality. As a geography major with a specialization in cartography, this drives me crazy. So I would like to fix it and either put them both in or put them both out. Doesn't matter either way. There's already a house on both properties. There's no development anticipated for either property. It's just a matter of cleaning the map up because it drives me nuts.
Well, isn't there a financial issue there?
There is not. It has no bearing, given that they're already developed properties, it has no bearing on the value of the property.
No. Do they have to pay for sewer hookup?
They do not. They're not required to do anything.
Right.
It is just on our map, we are cutting their property in half.
Okay.
Are those properties already served with the utilities that the urban service boundary is meant to limit?
I do not believe they are served. I believe the sewer stops just to the south of both of them. So any extension would be cost prohibitive just to tap into them.
What happens if they don't hook up to the sewer?
Nothing. They can continue to act as long as their septic field is in working condition. If they ever needed to hook up and it was available, they could.
And do we know the conditions of those sewers, of those fields?
We do not.
If you move them out of the service boundary, they could not hook up, is that correct?
It would be the township's intention that they not hook up. Now, if someone had a failing field and there was if there was a connection nearby, I think certainly we would be having a conversation of how best to serve our residents. But the idea of the urban service boundary is we're not going to extend services.
Right.
I can't remember what the issue was, but there was a big issue about this when this boundary was initially established, and I need to go back myself and research that.
So Mike,
This one looks like they literally just took the angle of the line across Green Road and carried it across without realizing there's properties on the other side.
What do the residents that are affected right there?
Those residents likely have no idea that they're in or out. They,
and that was going to be my question. We talked about this, I think, at our last meeting about a different property, that if this is a change that's made within the master plan, there would be no requirement that these properties or anywhere, any of the adjacent properties be notified to have opportunity to provide comment on it. And I'm always uncomfortable about making a significant change without having an understanding of what the affected property owners feel about it. You know, and that may or may not affect, we may make a decision, or the board may make a decision that says do it anyway. But I think it's helpful to have given them an opportunity, not just, I hope that they decide to read the public notice that the master plan's being updated, and I hope that they see the little line that says that something's changing on their property, but I know there's not a legal requirement, and I know it's a slippery slope to do that, but I just feel like it's important enough that somehow, knowing what they think, or that giving them an opportunity to have, at least, please read this master plan carefully and come comment if you want to, because it impacts your property, and then on them to do anything more with it, but just taking a little bit more of a step to get.
happy to reach out to these two properties specifically.
Yeah, long way around to say that, but I would be much more comfortable if that happened.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we put them in the service bound, I'm sorry, I should be recognized by the chair.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. If we put them in the service boundary and their field fails, aren't they then required to hook up at that point?
If sewer is not available, they are not required to hook up.
Correct. But if we put them in the service boundary, sewer is available, their field fails.
If sewer is available. Putting them in the boundary does not make sewer available.
Okay.
It is just a line on a map. There still has to be an extension to their property to make it available. And so then there becomes a cost benefit for the homeowner, that if they are the only people that are going to benefit from a 200-foot extension of our sewer line, is that cost more than the cost of re-engineering a field?
Okay.
Who bears that cost?
It would be on them at that point. That's, it's literally just, it's unlikely to ever be a scenario that occurs, because the cost of re-engineering a field is always going to be cheaper than extending sewer for one property and one house.
Commissioner McConnell?
Yeah, not getting to it, some of you can remind me. The subdivision right below that, do we know when that was constructed?
That's an excellent question.
It's an older subdivision. Probably
I mean, yeah, there may not be any immediate interest in subdividing those properties, but it happens, right?
I can tell you they would not be able to be subdivided based on our current ordinance standards.
They might have to be agglomerated before they were then subdivided, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, if you could buy it, you could buy up two properties with two houses and split it into two properties for two houses. You're not going to get more than two properties under our current ordinance.
Okay. Well, I really like the idea of involving the owners of those properties in the conversation.
Yes. Support.
We will reach out to them and see what we can do.
Thank you.
And then obviously the other area that we just wanted to get some feedback on tonight is the middle piece, which we've discussed previously. This runs basically from, boy, it just slipped out of my tongue. Just south of Tie Hart, the subdivision just south of Tie Hart, down to Grand River. And right now, the line goes sort of down Powell, jogs in, jogs out, and then jogs back down Grand River. Once you get down to Grand River to Cornell, and then keeps going actually because it picks up some properties further to
That's Georgetown,
east.
isn't it?
Georgetown, thank you. It would have came eventually. So the question in front of you is, given that we have now the Silverstone subdivision clearly sticks into this line, and you have a portion of the driving range in, but not the majority of it. Actually, this portion right here. Do we leave the line where it is, move it to be functionally a straight line from Georgetown down to Grand River, including the properties on Powell Road, or the other option, which staff would not recommend, is going all the way to Cornell, although functionally this doesn't change much because this is a single property with a ton of wetlands on it, and it's never going to develop anyway. This is the doggy daycare, which is also outside of the urban service boundary. So this is the only other area to discuss. We would welcome any feedback on it. Staff would recommend that we take the line from Georgetown down to Grand River, including the 1, 2, 3, 4 vacant properties here, these 2 vacant properties, and the driving range property.
This is where the payback district used to be, isn't it?
Correct. Portion of it, yes.
And that's no longer in effect, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So if we were to make a change like that, does that go along with sort of the belief that the urban service boundary is just continuing to expand eastward?
I don't subscribe to that belief. I mean, functionally, this is the only change you're ever going to make. I mean, it's either going to be Powell, this line of properties, or Cornell. You're not going to go east of Cornell because of the existing development patterns. There's functionally one property that could theoretically develop of any scale to the east of Cornell. We're actually working on a build-out analysis right now too to sort of help guide some conversation on as we go forward. And realistically, there's only one property that hasn't been subdivided in any way to the east of Cornell that would have any pressure on it, which is also part of the reason not to go all the way to Cornell, frankly.
This is where the residents start getting up in arms as we start moving that boundary eastward, and their fear of more development coming on the eastern part of the township gets a lot of feedback.
Certainly, there are some residents on Van Natta that have concerns, and I don't think there is any scenario under which large-scale development goes to Van Natta Road. I think from a functional perspective, there's no way to get water and sewer out there in a remotely affordable way. So you're never going to have any sort of density.
You do understand the sentiment that I'm sharing with you.
I do, and I'm simply sharing from a practical perspective.
Right.
If this line could not exist and we're not developing out to Van Natta Road, it's just not a realistic possibility.
I wasn't that involved in the discussion of the urban service boundary when it was drawn. When I see that bump out, my understanding of it is that development was far enough along that trying to cut it off at that point was going to be problematic. And the fact that a plan was approved and built that has the stub street, which the staff memo mentioned, not just to the south, but also down from the north, was the expectation that you lay these out because they're going to connect to something. Then it becomes a question of under what condition would you want to make an exception to the boundary? whether it's reduced lighting or whether it's some other facets of what you're proposing to do there that are worthy of relaxing the restriction on that boundary. So you could think, for instance, if the proposed development is going to deal with stormwater so well that it's not going to put further pressure on a stormwater system, then maybe we should think about providing, drinking water and sanitary sewer to that area. So that's kind of my philosophical take on is it always going to be a hard boundary, or is as things move out into the build out. And I'm not that familiar with what the provisions for exceptions currently are.
You may note one of the objectives that we have for the future is to actually sort of establish how we're going to review this in the future, because there are none from a practical perspective.
Tim, other than making the map easier to read and maybe letting you sleep better at night.
I have a 5-year-old, I don't sleep.
What is the motivation for actually changing the existing line?
So my point all along has been that if we do not at least discuss it robustly every time that we have a master plan update, we are more likely to be challenged. So staff is providing you with the argument to change it. And by having this discussion, whether you change it, whether you make a recommendation to change it or not, we are making the line more defensible no matter where it goes. That's my entire point. And we're going to have this conversation again in 5 years when we do the master plan. It may not be this exact change, but there will be other changes that, to make sure that we are vetting this thing at all stages, because there will be a point at which we get challenged on it. There's no question in my mind. There's so few of these throughout the state that if we don't make sure that we are continually reviewing it, eventually someone will call us on it. So there's no requirement at all to make that change. We're simply making sure that we review it properly.
I can guarantee that several of our trustees who were involved in these discussions will have some thoughts as well. So it'll be interesting to see when it gets to their level. I think we'll learn a lot about how this situation came about from that perspective.
Well, let me
We could ask the supervisor to come and join our next meeting and explain how the planning commission came up with this thing.
Yeah.
I guess my last comment would be so I'm like fundamentally in support of the urban service boundary philosophically, because it's like there's a shortage of housing. And so it feels like in theory that if a developer wanted to develop more housing in this area, if it was to shift east off of Powell Road, then that could become additional housing, because it would then be served by our main sewer. Is that a correct assumption?
Certainly, if you're going to move the boundary, it's only going to be housing, with the exception, I would say, of the driving range is on Grand River. There's certainly it's certainly a viable commercial or mixed use site, but everything else, it's going to be housing. It's going to be housing probably at the exact same size and rough layout as Georgetown and Silverstone, because that is the established pattern in the area.
Well, one of the large parcels there is actually owned by the school district.
That is a whole nother complication, yes.
Okay.
And I do have a confidential legal opinion discussing that, which I am unable to share with you. But we did have that conversation as well when the school district was talking about potentially building on this site of how does the urban service boundary interact with the school district site, and it's
Complicated.
muddy as the Red Cedar was last week.
And just so for my own awareness, so the state owns the school districts.
No.
Is that
No.
No, they're locally owned property?
Yeah.
Local control.
Okay.
But they are not subject to the vast majority of our zoning regulations.
Yeah, that was my second question.
The question is, what are they subject to? And that is a topic of some debate.
Okay.
I can tell you that they are subject to soil erosion control, and they are subject to location of curb cuts, because that affects local roads. They are certainly subject to water and sewer design requirements. They have to build it the way we would expect it to be built. Once you get beyond that, it gets pretty clear that they're not subject to a lot else.
That's interesting.
And just to circle back to the question of the neighboring subdivision on Green Road, it was 1960 were those houses largely built.
Thank you.
So, but tis
With the build-out of Georgetown and there's a subdivision across to the east of Georgetown that's down by just north of Doggy Daycare on the east side of the road. My question is, what's the water pressure like in that area now? And do we have sufficient water for our firefighters to deal with a problem over there?
I'm happy to follow up on that. I'm not aware of any pressure issues anywhere in our system.
Okay.
We run at a pretty high PSI, and it's pretty consistent throughout. But certainly when you get to dead ends, you do have problems occasionally. I can follow up on that, though.
So the first, the northern third boundary that you were talking about at first up in that subdivision you just mentioned again, I understand that, talking about moving the boundary because goes right down the middle of a parcel. But can you just say one more time, like, why the other one? It doesn't appear to split a parcel, or does it? Like, I'm looking at the parcel viewer and it seems to align. Why specifically this one?
It's a
Because there are
weird-shaped
lots of
parcel.
places where it's super jagged.
If it was a thinner line, you could see that the parcel in the back, it comes around to the road, so it kind of hooks around. So it's the back tail of it that gets cut off.
Oh,
The blue line is a little thick here, but if you.
On the Green Road?
oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, I'm talking about, so the Green Road, I understand that one. I'm talking about the other one. Why is that one an area of focus?
Functionally, it's the only, we just split the line up into three parts, is that you have a northern, middle, and a southern. And so this is the only area along the middle where there was any clear question as to where the boundary should be. The driving range parcel is split, a portion of it's in, portion of it's out.
Oh, okay.
Also, it has Grand River frontage, and so it's a little difficult discussion to have, to tell someone that a Grand River fronted parcel in the township is not within the urban service boundary.
Okay.
The property to the north of Silverstone is owned by the school, and that is unclear as to our regulatory authority there. And at that point, then you just have those four remaining parcels to the north, and it would look even more out of place if you only changed it for the school and the Grand River parcel.
Right. All right, thank you.
Absolutely.
It is a rather strange line. It looks like it's been gerrymandered to get around the Georgetown subdivision.
Boy, I don't like gerrymandering.
I know, but it looks that way. And I notice on your drawing there, you've got two yellow lines, one on Cornell and one looks like the rear property lines of those parcels.
Yes.
And to my mind, it would make some sort of sense to go to the eastern line, not on Powell Road, but the rear of those parcels as a straight line down. At least it treats all of the property immediately on Powell Road, just to the east, similarly.
Or you can go over to Cornell.
Yeah.
Eliminate the issue.
Yeah. So, but that's my thinking on it, because it looks like those four properties have just been intentionally excluded to make way for the Georgetown.
Yeah.
And that just seems like it's asking for some legal challenge.
Well, we appreciate the feedback as we try to start finalizing pieces of the plan. Obviously, would welcome further discussion at any point. But we will take this feedback, try and solidify this piece. Next month, we'll be back to talk about the goals and objectives in more depth, and we're going to slowly put a plan together here in the next few months. Team?
This is all delicious.
Yeah.
All set, Tim?
All set.
Thank you. All right, so we're now on item number 11, Township Board update.
I will give a brief update. The Township Board has taken up the Cade Street rezoning that the Planning Commission recommended for approval, and they completely agree with you that we should probably take care of this. And so that's moving along. I can also tell you that the Township Board had an excellent discussion about the sign ordinance recently and has formally introduced it for adoption it will be adopted at the next meeting. The intention is for it to be adopted. I don't presume to speak for the board members. I apologize, Madam Supervisor. They did have one recommended change with respect to not really abandoned signs, but functionally that's what we ended up categorizing it at, is when a business leaves and the sign is not removed in a timely fashion. There was a desire to address that. It's a sticky topic that I've tried in previous communities to address, and our attorneys developed a good approach that we think will work here. It's not as big of a problem here because the turnover is not nearly as great in our commercial spaces. So it's a small problem, but it's a problem nonetheless, and we think we have a good way to address it. But outside of that, they greatly appreciate the work that went into this from the Planning Commission, and I do too. After 5 years, I'm going to be glad to not be talking about signs again. Nice.
Until it's adopted and someone comes and complains about the new sign ordinance.
We're trying.
Anything else from Township Board?
That is what I have right
Do we
now.
have any liaison reports? The only report I've got, I attended the most recent meeting of the Downtown Development Authority. They finally had a meeting with a quorum, which has been a major issue for them. And they elected new officers, and that's about as much as they were able to accomplish, but it was a major accomplishment given the history of that organization. So they now have a functional quorum and a new set of officers. Anyone else have any liaison reports? No? Project updates? Oh, did you have any?
I attended the EDC meeting, but there was not a lot taking place there that was different from the meeting before that I reported on. The previous meeting didn't have a quorum, this one did. So they're continuing to move forward. They do have one announcement. They're going to have a Juneteenth event, and that is scheduled for June 17th through the 19th. There will be a celebration of Juneteenth, which is June 19th, but the events will be taking place on that Friday and Saturday. June 19th, I believe, is on a Sunday. And they're going to have things, they're going to have an advertisement and a listing on the township schedule with the events that are coming up. They'll be showing a movie. Two movies, that's correct. They'll be showing two movies outside at the chapel in the historic village. And I don't know if you're familiar with Juneteenth, but Juneteenth is the celebration of the actual ending of slavery a year and a half after it ended. So, to give you just a rough idea.
Very good. Incidentally, I just want to take a second to thank Commissioner Scales for sending out copies of that document that you had. It proved to be very helpful. Thank you.
Pardon? I'm sorry.
You sent out an email to all of us with that document attached to it?
Yeah. Oh,
it was very helpful. Thank you very much.
information we share because we care. And we should thank Director Smith for setting it up so I could attend.
We certainly appreciate you forwarding around. Anytime we have the opportunity to send people to training, we always appreciate it when they share the information. So appreciate that.
Can I pile on and thank Director Schmidt for sending along the notice of MSU's open house on their land use plan? There's some fairly interesting ideas that are in those maps. So if you have a chance to go to the STEM building and look at it, I think it's kind of a free flow event.
It is.
So, but they've got some interactive stuff, goggles and cool stuff because it's a STEM building. So you got
VR fly through the proposed changes. And I will say that they, of the surrounding communities, they've really tried to reach out to us because their vision for the health sciences corridor really does directly impact Meridian Township. And that's why I've really tried to get people to understand, we can have an impact on what MSU does. And we have to share our input early and often, though.
Is there any way we could, as a planning commission, can we request maybe not them, but the staff to give us a presentation on that stuff?
I'm happy to reach out to campus planner and see what their roadshow looks like, because as they're rolling it out now. I would consider Steve a friend, so I'm happy to talk to him about that.
You made me think of so I work in insurance, but we have health insurance companies here in the township, which would be a viable partnership in that corridor, I would suspect.
Absolutely. Worst case, I know the high level stuff, so.
Yeah. I just looked at the dates, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to make it, so.
Anything else? All right. I believe we are on public remarks.
Project report.
I'm sorry?
Project reports, if they have any.
He said none.
No. All right, the record should reflect no one from the public wishes to make a presentation, so we're now at the last item, which is adjournment. Chair calls for a vote. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much.